energy, the property of matter that causes motion, or the interaction of molecules. The motion may contract, it may slow down, it may accelerate. And Beethoven's matter needs some minimal musical representation, some sound. You have to hear something. So we have the most basic rudimentary sound, a single pitch, E, in 3 octaves. And its substance, its mass, is being articulated, delineated at regular mathematically calculated points, resulting in longer notes, shorter notes, and silence. And the mathematical frequency of the notes organizes them into rhythmic groupings, into patterns, some static, others more active, the interaction of molecules in space. There's one flute and one oboe on the one hand, and the first and second violins on the other. They're all playing the pitch E in octaves, all suspended in silence. They must represent something other than mere music to amuse and entertain us. It must be something far beyond that. And when I finally decided to think about this passage some years ago, I read about some of the things that fascinated Beethoven and were meaningful to him. For instance, his early and ongoing interest in the philosopher Immanuel Kant. And when we get to the final 15 years of Beethoven's life, we learn that he recorded his thoughts, some mundane, some more abstract, theoretical, some meditative, in his Tagebuch, or daily book, a diary of sorts. And there we find not only his musings on Kant, but also on the mysticism of Eastern philosophy and religion. Who? Beethoven? He wrote in his diary, quote, "The two things that fill the soul with new and ever-increasing wonder," quoting Kant, "the moral law within us and the starry sky above us." The matter from which the inhabitants of different planets, even animals and plants, are made, has to be of a much lighter and finer kind, and their structure all the more perfect to the extent they are further from the sun, that the excellence of thinking creatures, the swiftness of their imaginations, that on the planets from Mercury to Uranus and even beyond, the perfection of the spiritual world grows and proceeds according to their distance from the sun. Beethoven copied this passage from Kant into his diary? Or these translations from the sacred Hindu Rig Veda? "He, the mighty one, is present in every part of space. You are the true, unchangeable light of all time and spaces." Beethoven? Of space expanded and of endless time, before spheres beneath us rolled, or spheres above, before the earth in firmamental ether hung. Beethoven. Time, space, the nature of divinity. For years on his desk, he kept a copy of 3 ancient Egyptian inscriptions, which Friedrich Schiller had quoted in his 1791 essay, The Mission of Moses. "I am that which is. I am everything that is, that was, and that will be." Beethoven kept these inscriptions under glass on his desk. But what did all of this have to do with the actual creation of his music? Maybe nothing. Maybe a great deal.
Nowadays, we have pieces that are written and it's so clear. We have the composer's notes. We have maybe even the title of the piece is something programmatic. And unlike the Sixth Symphony, which Larry actually calls the Nature Symphony, there's no programmatic notes. There's nothing. He just writes in, the expressive markings and all that. And yet there's so much to dissect. And so what I love is that Beethoven is not trying to allude to anything specific. Yet, if you want to dive deeper into what Beethoven was reading, he was looking at, he had three Egyptian inscriptions that Schiller had quoted, I am that which is, I am everything that is, that was, it is to be. That is very much sort of like the definition of an omnipresent, omniscient God. And we also have hints towards the Hindu religion, and we knew that he was writing and reading a lot about Immanuel Kant. So that can inform us, but it doesn't take away, or it's not necessary in order for us to appreciate the symphony. And I think that's where Larry drops a really good line. If I'm getting what you're saying correctly, is that you don't need all of that to appreciate the symphony, yet there's so much he does that allows us to appreciate it maybe even more.
The lengthy, slow introduction is in two roughly parallel halves, and it features two themes that do not appear anywhere else in the work. Beethoven presents the first of these two themes right off the bat. It's a gentle pastoral tune in long notes, played by the oboe. It's continued by the clarinet. Nothing very cosmic about that, except that Beethoven is actually writing music that functions on two different planes or levels of sound. The serene woodwind pastoral that floats in one dimension, sort of in the background, and the brilliant shafts of sound that rain down around it. Music descends. It's solemn, but it begins to reanimate. With rising triads in the violins and violas, the pastoral reappears. And the pastoral, now majestic, powered by the ascending strings. And we hear the second theme of this introduction, also something of a nature theme. Here's the subdominant harmony. And now the strings will repeat the theme, but listen to the woodwinds. The quick repeated notes that re-energize this lyrical music. The energy increases, it persists, it expands. And the opening theme, again, declamatory, with rising strings all around. And again, the lovely second theme is heard. Now it's in the key of F major, the Pastoral Symphonies key. And again, as this theme repeats, those repeated 16th notes, the quick notes, are back, filtering in high and low, starting, there they are, and now high, low, and high. The volume, the intensity increase. And even though this is just an extended block of F major, the frequency of all these repeated notes increases. And F major suddenly becomes a unison E. A stunning moment, like a blinding flash of light. And now rhythm, the articulation and delineation of sound, of matter, rhythm, will take over. The opening pastoral is recalled like a chorale, but again, the brilliant flash of pure, distilled rhythm dominates. Then the note is E, of course. It's all E all the time. The note E is needed at this point only as a means of defining the metric divisions of sound in the void. It also happens to be the dominant note, E, of the key of A major, the main key of the symphony and our ultimate destination. And we have now arrived at that landmark passage with which we began. It emerges, it evolves from everything that we've heard that leads up to it. And Beethoven, musical master of the universe, muses on the nature of matter, the interaction of molecules that creates energy and motion. Isn't that what we're actually hearing, experiencing in this passage, in the space around us, as these fragments now begin to coalesce into an atom, a cell, a unit of energy?
Yeah, sometimes you're just left speechless by what Larry has to share.
This is, I believe, one of Larry's absolute masterpiece openings of analysis to Beethoven's symphonies.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots to talk about, but there's also so much just to absorb, I think, as a listener, right?
Exactly. And Larry's unique approach, which I absolutely love, even if someone doesn't share it with me, I still love it, is to see the whole and see the small components of the whole.
It's
It's
true,
incredible
yeah.
how he's able to absorb and look way past beyond the structures into what Beethoven was conveying. You know, he's phenomenal by that time. He was a matured, accomplished composer, and his tools were really fully dedicated to what he planned to convey. Now, we're doing basically backwards investigation there, going from the language which Beethoven applies in his symphonies to deeper and deeper in spiral to the core of what it is he's trying to say. And the way Larry approaches the research and brings in elements. I mean, you can read so much about Beethoven, you can just bury yourself in all the information. Thankfully, there's a lot preserved. And of course, Larry goes through all of it or everything that's available. But then how do you bring into your analysis the things which are the most important for the understanding? So as an analyst, Mr. Rapchak finds that unique path from the language, from the components, from the structures, step by step to the core of what all that is supposed to convey and according to Beethoven's own intention. And of course, some of the information he brings to the table may be completely unknown to people. That Beethoven was interested in, different philosophies at the time, and some of those kept handy.
Two of them together? And if they now link together into a chain of atoms, they might split into new divisions or partials, and split again. And new life might emerge, possibly in the form of a sprightly, animated melody. Amazing! And here he used that tiny fragment of the rhythm in the strings to maintain the energy. And then the motive itself, he used to build his transition. On the dominant chord of E, and away we go.
now that we're in the actual, we're past the introduction and we're actually at I guess, the main chunk of the first movement. What are your thoughts so far and on this whole little episode we had so far?
Well, Chris, this is incredible. I remember, my days in the conservatory and studying this symphony, of course, in great detail with some absolutely outstanding professors in Moscow. And so the analysis and the in-depth digging into themes, interactions, and it at times felt the more you dig, the more you get confused. But with Beethoven, though, that's an exception. Incredible architectural clarity of mind. That man is just stunning. How the elements complement each other and grow with each other. And it seems like really Beethoven is one of those absolutely architectural architects of the music, where the elements are positioned based on the bird view of the overall master plan for the journey, for the story of the symphony. He uses a lot of novelty and new and maybe not explored ways of using the theme. For instance, using the main theme for the closing theme. That's not customary for how you build the symphony, and the changes of the harmonic structure may be conventional, but it's not conventional to stay in tonic and dominant for as long as Beethoven does. Oftentimes, and in this symphony especially, it's very noticeable. He just vacillate between the two basic harmonic pillars, but then without losing the sense of progression, the sense of engagement. It seems like Beethoven's journey through all those episodes and turns of events is at neck-breaking speed.
Beethoven now extracts a piece of the theme. Just that. He suddenly pulls the volume back and he builds this motive, like so. While the cello and bass play this new variant. Leading to this outburst, which sprouts a new version of the theme, now in the key of C sharp minor. With this new bouncy accompaniment underneath. Here is this entire sequence. So, in quick review, you just heard that sprightly version of the theme in the minor key. It leads to E major, which is the dominant key for the secondary theme. It's very vigorous, with brilliant cascading counterpoint in the strings. But if you play it slowly, this theme and its bass line are built on a series of Baroque-like appoggiaturas and suspensions. Here's a suspension. Here's another one. Another one. It's actually rather expressive if you play it this slowly, but that's as close as we come to a contrasting lyrical theme in this movement.
I find that what he does, which is quite exceptional, because we just finished the first symphony, which I find uses a lot of different, maybe it's arpeggios or scales or sort of simpler building blocks in order to construct this. I'm not saying that they're simple, but just by means of what we're able to achieve on the instrument. But here, I find he uses harmony a lot more. He will suddenly go into sort of he'll throw different harmonic twists and turns. He'll suddenly land on this chord, which is very out of the ordinary within the context of, let's say, A major or E major. And then he'll find his way back. And I think there's something maybe, cosmic about it, that there is a lot of just perhaps nuclear gamma rays and other things that are thrown into the mix when you're of this kind of magnitude of cosmic, the cosmic world. But what I find is different. Yeah, exactly. It is, and what I would like to ask you about what you think about these sort of harmonic twists and turns that he uses.
Well, my favorite one is, of course, is landing on that E after F major. So,
Yeah.
That's definitely my favorite moment in there of a disruption, and also I find it very insightful of Larry to point out how Beethoven goes into the harmony being as the focus of the storytelling, and then can suddenly make a big turn and twist and just land on one note. Yeah. And by that, really draw our attention to the heartbeat of the music and focus on the rhythm. You know, how do you really make the focus? The rhythm is always in the underlying motor, the underlying engine of the music progression. Music unfolds in time with the rhythmic pattern. But here we're purely and solely focused on the birth of the rhythm for the entire movement of the symphony.
Yeah, I think it's something, I really like what you're saying there in terms of the rhythm, because I think the rhythms are sort of the molecules in which this pieces, this whole universe is being constructed. But what is really fascinating is when you have this motoric sort of bump, ba-dum, bump, ba-dum, bump, ba-dum, bump, and then you stop it, or you change turns and you bring it back to bop, 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 bop. There's you feel like you're being driven around, and suddenly you're flying and soaring, and then you're back onto the train again. There's this sense of, even before probably aircrafts were being invented or constructed, there's this sense of soaring and then landing and then back into the it's a wonderland. It's like being on a roller coaster. I find it such a really visceral way of experiencing music, and I think the way to do that is within the rhythmic motives.
And now this sets up another section, suddenly mysterious, and most likely using diminished seventh chords, and a fragment of the theme in the oboe, and miles below the double basses. All the time, the first violins are playing the first measure of the theme, which now builds, while the fragment underneath is in the bass, into a huge burst of E major, all of it built on the rhythmic cell. That spooky Neapolitan chord. And now, the closing passage, for which Beethoven does not write a new closing theme. He uses the main theme in the dominant key of E major. And the cello and bass respond, while the second violins and violas dig into this driving flamenco-like rhythm, and a full orchestral E major scale. So we're observing the proper format here. The exposition closes in the dominant key of E major. But there's hardly anything proper sounding about this scale passage. So let's back up now to that mysterious diminished passage with the pathetic little oboe in dialogue with the double basses, and listen to Beethoven's unbelievable control of the cosmic forces he has unleashed.
Well, there you go. Another banger from Lara Rapchak. I really like his last phrase, which is the unbelievable control of the cosmic forces that he has unleashed, that Beethoven has unleashed. He's not only opening the Pandora box, he's able to control it within his hands and allow us to really enjoy it.
To me, there's the choices of words by Larry Rapchak are just incredible. It feels like Beethoven finally met his match in terms of constructing sentences.
Yeah.
And finding the vocabulary for it.
Absolutely. Larry is an absolute genius. And I hope to have him on the show sometime so we can just basically unleash praise on him for the amazing work that he has done.